So hello around the morning here, welcome to my review of Uso episode 2. Sorry for the lighting here, it's super late, it's past midnight here. Basically I have a lot of stuff to do with my court lawsuit thing, right? Which I tend to talk about sometimes. But yeah, basically I'm spending a lot of time going through like log files and evidence and so on. Anyway, that's why I'm quite a bit so to have at work, right? And after, so basically, I work, right, and after work, I get to, spend time reading about the laws for my other job. So it's just for my consulting gig, right? So it's just a lot of like, feels like I have a 15-day workday or something. It feels like I'm working, just whole day. Anyway, sorry for this then. It's super late. I should be like 5 hours earlier this way. But anyway, I'm talking about this anime. I find it really good actually, like really good. Koi to USA so far. It's really weird, but it's really good. And I really want to note on this weirdness, right? Because I think that some guys say, "Oh, it's weird because it's like forced marriage and it's like whatever Japanese culture or yada yada." That is not what I feel is weird with this anime. It is not weird that the premise is not weird. Yes, the premise is somewhat happening, right? But it's not weird in that sense. What makes anime have this kind of weird touch to it is that like everyone is moving, not everyone, but the three characters that we have, everyone, but those three characters we have so far, they're moving in like in a direction, right? That feels very like unique and it's great because they don't act like they normally do in anime, and they have this like, well, mate, she's befriending her enemy voluntarily, and this is weird, and yada yada and so on, right? They kind of have this kind of weird flow to it, so the flow is really weird. That feels weird, but they still get to this kind of almost the expected result of like, okay, we have two girls liking the same guy, and he has this weird triangle drama, and they're also best friends suddenly, which is kind of like how Niseko and so on also does as well, right? That the girls, for some reason, have become best friends, right? So yeah, so they kind of get into that just in a really weird and funky way, and it makes it feel really fresh. Which the anime, yeah, it's like fresh approval rating. If anything, I think the anime deserves. As it's also hard to explain, right? I would say, but just in the way that it does. Okay, so I mean the result is kind of here, and the result is kind of what we expect. Not exactly, but I think the overall result is actually what I expect, right? So if you have this kind of like love comedy, maybe even horror anime, and you expect it to go there eventually, right? But instead of going this pathway, they kind of go like this, right? But they still get there eventually. It's like dunk, dunk, dunk. It's a kind of weird, again, an edge kind of way, right? But they still get to that kind of the expected result. And that gives it a really weird feel to it. That's a word weird a lot, but it really does because normally then you would expect this kind of weird flowing thing to land you somewhere else, right? Maybe still in the same genre, saying some love comedy, shoujo, more shoujo oriented anime, manga, and so on. And you expect it to get a little different, right? You expect it to be maybe arc rival in another way. I don't know, expect really, but still, right? You don't expect it to have the kind of the normal setting so far, but it does. So that makes it very special. I felt the same thing when I watched the first episode. How we see them doing this, like, okay, he loves the girl. He's very front about it, right? The one thing this anime does right away is that the main character tells the girl he loves her in like the first 10 minutes of the episode, right? It's not like the most animes when they take them freaking a season or two, right, to do that. And that's blatantly right away, but they still managed to get into the forced love triangle, forced marriage thing, right? They still managed to do that. So that's interesting. And this episode is that we see Lilina, we call her, right? I think that to me this has more like a name than Ririna. Probably because Lilina is a name here. But anyway, we see her doing this like, oh, I'm gonna talk to her, even though she's my enemy. It's what you would expect. He's like, I'll talk to her because she's awesome. And then I want to learn about love. And it's like, I finally have a best friend. And that is a really forceful way to meet, your love rival. And it's still ending up with them becoming, and she's like, I'm gonna call her tomorrow, and she's happy too. So Cass is also happy. So it ends them up having this classic love triangle, right? From you see, a bunch of different romance, comedy, kind of animes, right? Where you have the main character having at least two girls that both like him, and for some reason they also got good friends with each other though, and he's trying to figure out who he loves, I guess, or maybe how he can, So it gets to the kind of the expected mean value, right? Not really though, and then also what is fresh because it has the very formulatic like situation of two best friends like in the same guy, that kind of thing. He is upfront with one of them right away, as I said earlier. He loves her, and he's kind of upfront that he likes Lina as well right away. He's like, first he's a little like, I don't talk to her, I try to bother the girl. But as soon as you start talking, especially when they're in his nurse office, he's like, you're a pretty good listener and you're intelligent and I like hanging out with you. So he befriends her right away, pretty much, right? As soon as kind of forced, he kind of forced into it. But still, like, he befriends her really quickly and he stays it too. So it's kind of like, he's very upfront about it. And he gets this, it's very special that in the anime so far. It might become super cliche later on, but I don't think so. And one thing too that I do like, that I hope is going to be something, is that we have this other male character, right? And I saw him in the preview, having some more scenes, and he was like trying there to like, Sakasa-chan, I'm gonna look at this image though, and it's like ruin their love, right? Between Yajima and her, I suppose. And that felt like something in my opinion, you don't see too much in like romance comedy and so on. It's mainly like one guy and then the girls are fighting with each other, right? Or you have that kind of thing, right? And then you have maybe some other male characters, and they're usually kind of sport characters, or there might be one of those male characters that kind of know everything. So he might be that character, though. He's like, he knows that she still likes him, and he's wanna help him, right? So it's like trying to push her into it. That could be it. It could be that kind of the supportive character that's kind of like, he knows what everyone is thinking, so he's kind of pushing, the different like positionings of people into, the situation, right? So they could be that. They could be completely harmless in that sense. He just wants to like help them, with the love and so on, amongst his characters. But he felt like he had a very malicious intention. So I don't know. That's also a little interesting. That's for me at least. Actually the one I noticed the most. I feel after watching the episode again, it's like that's what I feel is it's quite different, because usually, as I say, that you have the other main characters that are kind of supportive, or they are kind of like extremely supportive. Like your best friend knows everything. He tries to help you with stations and so on. He's very knowledgeable, very like meta knowledge, like the viewer knowledge. But this guy is like, I'm gonna get that girl. That's what I felt. Yeah, so that's a little different. Kind of throwing in that sense there. It's more shoujo, I suppose, more shoujo. But still, I feel that because it has the kind of classic formation of a triangle, it has a love triangle, right? And then you have this other guy on the side, like, I'm gonna ruin it and get them, like, I'm gonna net the red. It's like, that felt a little different to me at least. But I might be completely wrong though. We don't know that. I just looked at the preview, looked at this short bit of him this episode, and I felt that he had some kind of vicious plan, and that comes back to me a little bit, with the mail that was wrong. That maybe she's completely yandere, and she was very obsessed with Nejima at the restaurant. So yeah, she might be really yandere. Or is it some other guy like that guy? He seems to be quite intelligent person. He might have some hacking skills. I don't know. I mean, it's like, this is the first thing I want to say. Because of scene by scene, because that was very, to me at least, particular. I was like, this is different. This is different. This is a weird thing, really weird thing, like in that sense. But anyway, let's talk about this scene by scene, just quickly here. As I go very quickly, what I liked. I loved the scene at the nurse office. That was really funny. That was great. Of course, when she is in her underwear, I guess, kind of laundry, half garment, right? And she's dressing up, right? And he's like, "Oh, I heard about this, tapeworm thing." And he's like, oh, "That's not real." And he jumps the car, like, "Oh, who told you?" And it's like, "Panties? Who's this panty? Panty and stocking?" Huh? That was great. It was classic funny, classic, harem, etchy romance. But yeah, very that fence, right? The girl gets out there, she's sundry at him, and that's what she's supposed to herself. And then she of course blames the guy, because even though it's her fault that she went out, right? Very classic, but I still like it. I mean, I read these mangas since Tenshin Moyo. I watched Tenshin Moyo as a kid, pretty much. So, yeah, like, I don't know, as a teenager, and it's still the same, but it still works for me. I don't know, it still works for me. There's a great scene, and also of course the mattress scene was pretty obvious too. He jumps in there. I said the live reaction, I was like, okay. He enters, she still has a dress on, so it's not super embarrassing. It's like, oh yeah, okay, he follow her. Okay, yeah, no, it's anime. But it's like, and that's something that makes this anime, I say it again, weird to watch because it has so many things that feels fresh, right? But at the same time, you do this like super cliche things like, oh, if the guy enters a room with the girl that he just met, he accidentally trips on her and they accidentally fall into this mattress where they accidentally unbutton her blues. Right? This is super cliche anime thing. It's been down to death. It still works somewhat. It's fun somewhat. But this anime, as again, then it's interesting using the, I think in the meta value that has this like, okay, it has a super cliche thing. That's super, as I mentioned, that it's super, very, very things we've seen 10 times before, right? Every year. But on the same time, they have these like really weird setting characters, how they act and so on. So it gets like something is super fresh, another thing is super cliche, and it's like this weird mix of it makes you think like, this is a weird anime. That's kind of how I interpret it. That was a great scene. And I also like the whole thing actually with the family. I like his mom. He's like, oh my daughter. Oh, I'm gonna have grandkids soon. And one thing I was thinking about watching it is definitely, I wonder what like the age of birth is, like their average, the first son daughter average is, because obviously they do this thing right because they want to have more kids in Japan. Birth rate is so low as it's in reality, and they're like, oh, it's so bad, so let's just force everyone to get married. So they get married at 16, and then they supposedly, consummate the marriage and so on, right? At some age, but haven't really exactly told us when they do it. I think it's like at 18 or so, 20 maybe. 20 is legal age. No, it's legal age. It's not sexual legal age, but it's like legal age when you're a grown up in Japan. So it might be 20 then. But I'm wondering, it's like. But obviously they can have sex legally even at 15, I suppose. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like that's something that I actually would like to know in this anime. Like, when did you expect to have kids? I think it's an interesting point just to make, because just the forced marriage is something we have seen in traditions over humanity's history, right? And people in some countries see very popular, and some like Japan still has it somewhat, right? It's not like Japan has a forced marriage thing, but in Japan, because they do want to get married a lot and so on when they're like 25, 30 and so on, it's quite common still like that you're like your parents might help you, maybe you can meet. It's kind of like, oh, your grandma knows someone that might want to get, that kind of thing I think is very strong in Japan. It is my experience. I mean, I know, I won't say I'm the biggest Japanese expert ever, but I know a lot of people live in Japan. I have several friends there. Obviously, I like anime and so on, and manga, and also got more comics and more and DC and so on. But yeah, so it's like, and I'm wearing this is a card game. I think so, Polish card game. Yeah, it's called Earthcore. So I dabble into games and so on. So obviously, I know I'll say somewhat about the history, Japanese, modern culture, and it's not too uncommon, I would say, to my understanding. And I don't want to talk about too much because I'm not an expert on it, but I'm just saying like, and to me, I don't think that's too bad, to be honest. Forced marriage is very different from like, oh, your parents know some other parents and they also have like a kid around your age, even if you're like 30, they're like, I shouldn't get married now, I know this sweet, my bingo partner, like her son is 31 and he's really beautiful and he seems to be a really nice person. She's very intelligent. She might be a perfect husband for you. Like that isn't that weird, right? It's like, you're older, your parents are getting old and they want to have grandchildren. So I don't think that's so weird. Like if my mom called me, it's like, oh yeah, do you remember this girl from your high school or senior high school? She apparently is now living in your town, and I talked to her mom, and she just moved there, and why don't you? Here's your phone now. Do you call her? Like I wouldn't be like, okay, why not? Given that I like the person, I mean, obviously, but yeah, given that she was, a person that or a guy, of course, as well, but like just given that it was someone that I actually was friends with, or at least had some interest in, or whatever, during high school. My grandma actually does that somewhat, not so much, but she does that. She does it in like a weird way that is very, like this very, I don't know, unnecessary. Yeah, my grandma basically does this thing. She's like, oh, I talked to my friend, and she's like around her age, and she also has a grandson or granddaughter around your age. Remember this person? She might be interesting to hang out with. Not really that, but she kind of mentioned that, and she kind of raises it over, and she's like, oh yeah, and she has like very weird sense of like, she thinks that I should know everyone. That's my grandma. She's kind of fun in that. So she's always like, oh, do you remember her? And I met her yesterday. She's really cute, so on. And I'm like, no, I don't recognize the name at all. Oh, but you should though. She's super into this sport, and she was very agile, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, I don't remember that at all, that person. And she's like, oh, and I was like, how old is she? She's like, oh, she's 18. And I'm like, grandma, what? Yeah, like, I'm 18? She wasn't even in, yeah, she wasn't even close to being in high school. I was like, I'm old. No, but like, yeah, so it's like, what? She's 10 years younger than me, 5 years younger than me, and so on, right? And like, my grandma does that all the time, in kind of weird way, not too much, but when she tries to do it, she usually kind of weird off-putting in the age thing. Not necessarily just like 10 years younger, 5 years younger, also like 10 years older, right? So just a kind of weird thing. I guess she's old, so she's like, whatever, the time span between if you're 20 or you're 40, that is whatever to her. I don't know, but she kind of does that thing. And it's like, and I'm just like, grandma, that means she's like 15 years older than me. So no, I didn't go to high school with her. I don't know that person. And she's like, yeah, they were reversed, right? Pretty much. And yeah, that's very efficient. If your grandparents does that, it's something similar. But yeah, anyway, I mean, I think that, like, as an anime, the whole marriage thing in Japan, it kind of makes, I don't say it makes complete sense, but I say, yeah, I can see it happening, because, to my knowledge then, it's not that extremely uncommon in Japan. And I think the main, as I mentioned, I think it's mainly about, right, okay, you have, your parents, maybe your grandparents, or some, maybe even some co-workers, but I think it's kind of, matchmaking, kind of, helping couples to meet and so on, because also in Japan, they are quite low birth rate and so on, right? In reality, right, people are like, should you get married now and so on, and it's a lot of pressure of getting married in Japan, a lot, when you're like past 25 and especially past 30, so that is something, yeah. So I don't think the anime is like extremely far off. Of course, it feels really weird. It's like, oh, you for her to marry, and it's crazy. But it's interesting. I think it's interesting because I really like this whole scene with the house. That's why I know I'm not hanging there, but I really like that because we see her mom, his mom, and then her, yeah, both of them. They were like, oh, you went to school with me? Oh, that's great. And they're like hitting off because it's kind of interesting. And I like this in anime because it really feels like it could happen. Like I'm only saying that I don't think this can happen ever in reality. It just seems crazy. But on the same time, especially in Japan, I would say, especially in Japan. But I say, yeah, Japan is a good country for it because they still have the kind of tradition of like helping your kids finding husband or wife and so on, right? I would say, at least from friends I know, they're like, yeah, my mom talks to me and tells me to get married, or tells she know this guy, or her friend know this guy, or her friend has his son or daughter and so on. And it's not like super. I don't say it happens to everyone all the time, but I think it is something that is happening, right? And same in other countries as well. And even where I come from, I see it, right? And I live, for example, in Ireland. There it happens a little bit because it's quite in the commute and so on, right? So yeah. Because the setting there doesn't feel too off-putting, right? In my opinion, and I like it then because I feel that their moms is act kind of natural. It feels kind of good to me. It's like she's like, yeah, finally my son got a wife. So finally, I can be friends with this other, mom, probably about the same age. That's why earlier it feels like people probably get kids around the same age then, like when they start dating, because they kind of forced to date and then they will, and then they get kids, so they probably get pregnant around 18 maybe or something, 17. I'm guessing at latest 20 probably, right? So they're on the same age, and her dad's like, oh yeah, finally my daughter's getting a husband. Oh, she's gonna be so happy, and she's gonna be alone anymore. And like they're all happy, and they're all like, yeah, I love his dad when he gets running away because he's scared and he's a douchebag in the beginning, right? And I really loved Ririna there, and she's like, I'm trying my best here, and it's like, damn it, she's actually really brave, and I'm just being really mean to her. But I mean, I really like that whole thing, right? And I was gonna say, it felt really funny when his dad is like, wait a minute, son? why don't you go and talk to her? Like, he's like, yeah, because I mean, obviously, her mom's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll go and get her, and his mom is like, no, don't worry, my son is an idiot, and he's like, oh, he's an idiot, and dad is like, this is perfect. Hey boy, why don't you go and get the girl? You know, run after her. Do it as they do in the romantic movies. It's like, really, Dad? But yeah, let's go. Like, perfect. And of course, when they get out of the whole room and her blouse is open a bit like by accident, of course. And he's like, oh, the blouse. And the parents are like, yay! Yay! They're lovers. And everyone is just happy, like, yay! Grandkids finally. So it feels like it's something that seriously, I think that most people, I'll say most, but it feels like something, right? That a lot of people actually wouldn't mind so much. You sit there, you have your son or you have your daughter. She's like, oh, she's 40. She has no kids yet, you know, I'm 70 now, down, grandchildren. You know, you have that's kind of your fear, right? For a lot of people. Or like, you know, you in your 50s, you're like, damn it, I want to have grandkids now, right? I'm soon in my 60s and I'm 70s. And my kids, they aren't getting married, they're just, you know, bouncing around. You're like, it'd be nice if I could get my son to the down, right? And it probably makes society a bit better in the sense of... it's gonna be super society based now, but I mean in general, I don't have stats for this, but what I read, and it seems to me at least seems very mathematically reasonable. I would assume this is completely on a tangent here, but it feels very natural that people that are married probably do less crime. I'm just gonna state that here, and I think I'm right. That just makes sense to me because. Not just like, you know, on the gender specific crimes, right? I don't want to go into that too much, but I know, of course, that you have a lot of like psychopaths and so on, sociopaths that are classically married and then they do this and so on, right? And that is because most sociopaths are have a very charm and so on, right? And they also psychopaths as well, and I think both of them see it as an advantage having kids and a wife and so on. So you can pretend to be normal, right? I think that's probably why they usually have it. If you ask me about psychopaths and so on, I think typical psychopaths like 2 kids, a wife, you know, never miss work, and they murder people every day on the side, right? And I think a big reason that is because they want to have that normal family life to pretend that they're normal, right? I think that's the... I'm doing this thing. I sound like a but I think it's a big thing. And those people probably would kill people anyway if they forced marriage. That wouldn't matter. But I think the other people is generally, like, if you have... I think one thing right away, because in this world, I found... Actually, honestly, I want to say more about that. But yeah, like, this anime probably won't go into that. But I just think that it's kind of... I think the underlying those factors make, like, the mom being, like, suddenly best friend and happy. It makes sense to me because I'm thinking about it as a stageable thing, like a country would work. To me, at least, I think the country would be less crime, as I mentioned them. Because one thing alone is that you're never living alone. In this world, and yeah, that might be really horrible, but it's just, I mean, right? In this world, no one at, you know, age 60 plus pretty much live alone, right? They get married at like a forceful last teenage years or something, right? Or when as soon as they are, you know, legally grown up, all of whatever age they can have, didn't say exactly, but something like that. And they live together and so on, right? And I think it's just harder to do crimes, a lot of crimes, if you don't live alone, right? And that might sound something blatantly, but it really is because a lot of those crimes, especially like drugs and so on, pushing you together. But I think generally those stuff you have a harder time doing, right? If you don't live alone, you know, random stuff, right? Whatever horrible stuff you can do on the internet. But it's hard, right? If you're married, just generally because you have your next person next to you. Even if you're forcibly married, you still have a person there, you know, living with the person all the time. And that might sound super blatantly, but I really think so. It's an important note here. And of course, all those things like, yeah, you probably have to have sex almost. In this world, you have to get kids. This always be the law to get kids and so on, right? But that also means though, but it's important though for as a law, as a legal country, it means that, I think we can assume that most people have kids in this anime world at a very young age, you know, 20 or so. And it also means that if you have kids, You have to work, you have to, like you don't want to be on whatever welfare or something similar. If you have kids, you get money, right, or education and so on, right. But I mean, it's Japan, so people get education. But I feel like generally people are gonna be more motivated to do stuff, right, because they have kids at an early age, and of course also thinking about in Japan. Like I mean they work a lot and so on, but I mean generally like that is probably gonna be even more increased, because everyone has kids when they're like 19, 20 and so on, right? So it feels like that's the weird thing that anime I'm thinking about. And I know it's really super long now, and it's talking about it random, like what would I should do another video about this. What would this mean for a country if it was for marriage? But I think it's interesting to think about it, and I might do another video when it's not like 1 a.m. and I'm tired, but. It's more talking about it, the more I think about it, interesting philosophical idea. Actually, it's kind of Plato's idea word, and I love philosophy. But I mean, it's an interesting state of a country, right? Because I think it really means the crime will go down a lot, and people probably would work more too. Yeah, because like most people would be like, man, I have kids. I have like 3 kids, and I'm 21. I need to get a job. I get a job, right? I think it feels like most people be in that situation, and they're like, yeah, I need to get a job. I need to get education. I mean, yes, though Japanese today education is very highly valued in Japan, so they probably get education anyway. But I mean, generally, and of course the work is good as well. But still, it feels like even more so, right? It enforces even more. Generally, and I say again, yeah, and also when you have kids. I think people also do less crime, and so I don't say it's crime mistake, but I think people generally do that, right? Because you don't want to go to jail, because then who will care for your kids and so on. I think you automatically, that's again back to that too. Yeah, and actually, yeah, like generally, I said earlier, if you don't live alone, it's hard to do crime, and I really mean it about everything, because not just you can't watch this, but you also it's hard, like you can't kidnap someone, and it's easier for someone to leave me alone, kidnap someone, right? But it is right. And so on, and you don't have your wife there, but then you also have your kids there, probably, and so on, right? So it's hard to do everything, and you have more responsibilities, and not only don't you want to go to jail and so on because you have your children, likely have a lot of kids earlier in this world. You also have your wife, right? She is relying on you, or your husband, of course. But I'm thinking of my yeah, say wife. I was thinking I was living in the world, but I mean generally you have your spouse and. You have your 4 spouses at 16, right? So you're married at 16 pretty much, which means that if you go to jail or something, right, or do something otherwise, like leave your job suddenly with no extra job or no union payment, nothing, and suddenly you're living there bankrupt pretty much, which I don't think people do generally very often, but I don't think it happens very often in real life, right? But some people just go crazy sometimes, come across be a lot of different situations, but I mean some people just say, I'm gonna gamble, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna move to this thing, and that will obviously be way less happening, because everyone is married to someone at 16 already, right? Pretty much. So you probably won't be doing that. Woohoo, crazy! I'm just gonna move to Hawaii, and that's gonna be less chance, because you have to legally bring with your wife, and you probably can't get divorced in this world, I suppose, because they force you to get married. It's probably illegal to get divorced, right? Unless the other person is like physically harming the other one, I suppose. They haven't talked about that actually at all, which I think is a little, I don't say bad, but I wish they kind of just covered the rules, because they're talking about how he is like, maybe she won't marry me. Like, can they say no? I guess they can say no. It's like, no, this guy is a violent drug addict, and he hits me every day, and we are supposed to get married next year according to this law, but he punches me in the face every day. So yeah, then you probably can get away with it. I mean, there must some kind of that system must be there, obviously. But otherwise, it doesn't seem like you can avoid it, I guess. And I would assume then, if you can't avoid it, you probably also cannot divorce anyone. And you can't argue for a loveless marriage, right? So pretty much it's like, oh, my husband goes to work, and then we don't do anything really together, because we had kids like 3 years ago, so we have like 2 kids already, and just 1 more. So we just like live together, kinda, right? That sounds really boring and horrible, and I'm not saying it's a perfect world at all. I'm just saying that is probably something that happens to a lot of people, right? And mostly in this world, but you probably wouldn't be legally in any way could avoid your husband, right? Or I mean, like avoid with like divorce your husband or your wife. whatever reason, as long as it's like, oh yeah, she doesn't do a crime or something, right? It's like, yeah, you probably would be like, you can't divorce them unless they actually are like threatening you to injure you or something, right? Or actually do, of course, injure you, or something similar. Or otherwise, you probably can't get rid of them. And so it's like, yeah, it's just, yeah, I think it limits a lot of stuff. That's a good thing, though, of course. The bad things, of course, is something that is, I mean, yeah, the bad thing is extremely obvious, of course. You will be forced to marry someone without loving them, without knowing them beforehand. It's even go completely from genetic standpoint, which also is very interesting. It's probably how I would design it, to be honest. If I was the state lawmaker and back, okay, how would we design this forced marriage thing? I'd be like, personality-wise, I'd rather do it genetic-wise. That's probably how you should do it, though. So it's, I'm being pragmatic here, but yeah, that's how you should do it, right? Because it means that instead of caring about who fits who and so on, perfectly matchmaking to make them happy, you're taking as a state leader, so you're more like, I just want people to have like the the most healthy kids and the whatever and so on. And you talked about episode 1 of like, yeah, people are much more healthy now because they're like avoiding genetic bad, because if you have someone, right, with different kinds of like especially recessive genes in your DNA, that makes you if you have it, nothing happens because your dominant genes is what matters. But if you have a pair of recessive genes, and the older one, your spouse is also your spouse, but you also is it. So if you have, they have like one in I say, but it's yeah, basically it's like you have different pairs of your genes, and you can have recessive genes in one of them or in both, but it's much lower chance. And your dominant gene is what determines you. So for example, if you have this is not exactly the same for everyone, but generally, like if you have a dominant gene in your eye color, so it's brown, and recessive is blue, you will have brown eyes because the dominant gene like overrides the recessive gene. So to have blue eyes, you usually need to have two blue parents, blue-eyed parents, because they both need to give you your recessive gene. It's like my parents are both blue-eyed. But it's not always the case. You can have different kind of mutation and so on. But generally, it's kind of like if you have two blue-eyed parents, you can have blue eyes or you can get green eyes, because blue and green is counted as the same thing for your recessive gene pool in your DNA. So that is very hard to not get those eye colors if both the parent are it. Well, not necessarily. I mean, your parent can have like very dominant gene pool, but 7% basically it's not impossible. I want to say someone like, oh shit, those aren't my real parents, but but generally it's like that, right? The eye color is it's very classic dominant versus recessive gene. So there is no disadvantage having the recessive gene, of course, in eye color, but you can have a disease in a recessive gene. That's not too uncommon. So you can be a bear or something, but it has no bearing or chronic illness for there, but it has no effect on you because your other DNA is overrides it. So it's like, if you have your dominant gene, it's like, no, we're gonna have this healthy thing, and your recessive gene is like, I don't want to do that, but it's like, I don't care, and you just overrides it, right? And that's why, for example, if you take the same rats and you just do it all the time, right, with them, with this hierarchy, right, and you just kind of ball up the gene pool, you get problems because they will all have the same recessive genes and so on, right, and it works for it. But if you do it now, so you have to have the genes. So the problem for some children, or they might even not be born because of that, with some different genes, not just recessive genes, but generally. The thing is that you can have then, for example, an issue in one of the genes, and you give it to your, you mate with someone, right, and they also have it, so both of you are completely healthy, because you both have a dominant gene and you have a recessive gene, or like your 11th chromosome 2, for both of you have the same disease there, right, you're both bearing of the same recessive gene. This isn't only the issue I'm saying from recessive gene points here, right? That means that you have 1 in a quarter chance that your child will have both of the 11 chromosome recessive gene thing, because you can give either your left or your right gene, right, of every pair, and the other person does the same thing. So if you both have like AA and AA, the kids can only have AA. But if you have AB and all has AA, the kids can have half your kids will have AA, half will have AB, right? Because you do the mix. They always mix those genes at random. That's how it works. How human race evolves, right? And hopefully they do the best pairing, and like the children that gets more kids, they're stronger, they will survive longer, so they probably will have better genes, and that's how it always works, right? That's how it evolves. So Darwin, yeah. So the thing is that if you both have like A, B, A, B, right, and B is really bad, you say B is bad, like it's horrible. If you have it, you're blind. So I don't know. You can't read something. You're gonna die. But that means that your A is dominant in this case, then, so it doesn't matter for you. But your kids can have AA, right? 25% chance, and then they're completely fine and even lose that gene, right? And that's the thing how genetic works as evolution standpoint, because it means that if everyone had AB, most, but the healthiest kid would be the AA, or AB would be equal, I suppose. But AA kids, if you have an AA kid, right, that kid cannot get a B kid, an AB kid, or like a BB kid, because they can only get AB or AA with other people, right? So that means that if you have an AA kid, so even if you mate and you get like AB, AA, BB, and BA and AB, same thing here. AB and BA is not the same, but you can get different things. Your AA kids, they have a high chance of getting, just AA kids themselves, right, and so on. So that means that even if you have only that 10% chance of getting an AA kid, and you have 20 kids, 5 of those are gonna be just AAs, and they will actually have more kids then. So that gene and that combination, the AA combination, is gonna be the one that probably gets more kids eventually. If you look at it as like 1,000 year, 500 years, 10,000 years, right? Especially the longer you look at it, it's gonna be more like that, right? And that's how evolution kind of works in generally. So you're gonna have that. Okay, this combination is stronger, and that can be in everything, right? So in animals, especially, look at Darwin, right? So you look at this thing here, it can survive the winter. So obviously, those like spiders, they had different kids, and that combo of like double W is an anti-winter gene that spider has. It can survive the cold. So even if it had like different kids, that other kids died from the winter because they couldn't handle the exoskeleton, couldn't handle the winter. So that double W gene in the spider, that's the important thing. So that's probably happened like 10,000 years ago when ice age started. But look at today, all of these spiders has the double W gene, because obviously their ancestor was the one that survived the most. They got more kids, right? So that's how it works generally. I'm just like very, very open here. Just broad speaking here. So, but I suppose they do that in this anime. Is that they only go for you can't be married to an AB if you're AB or BA. Like this is not the same thing. They will be like, you can't marry them. If you're AB, you have to marry someone with AA, because that means that they can only give you A, you can give them 10% or 50% chance. Sorry, you can give them, but they have AA, and AA is equal here, so they wouldn't it's probably in like a real deep DNA. You probably have like A1 and A2, right? Probably, and there are minor difference probably on them anyway, right? But neither of them has B, so it's probably you still have 25 different 20%. You still have 4 different combos, right? You can have A1, A2 with B or A. So you can have A1 your A, or A2 your A, or A1B or A2B. Even if A1 and A2 is even equal, that is how it works, right? You said the result is regardless. So if you have A1 or A2 with B, it is a result. But it probably doesn't even have that. It probably, because the gene has different setups, right? So it's more like neither of this big gene has B. So it's like A, B, C, D, E, that. So you have A, C, E, F, G, and no one has B here. So it's more like that. So, but the other one also has A, but D, E, C, G, L, and don't have B. So it's more like that. Those are combos, but neither has B. That's the important thing, right? That's how it works. So that's how it is really, right? It's like, yes, neither has B. I think that's probably a better way to say that, actually. people usually describe it as AB and baby and XY and so on, but it's probably better to say actually in this case we're talking about like diseases and so on, that neither of this one would have the recessive dangerous gene more like. I mean, and as a gene, I mean the part of that chromosome, right? So it's more like, okay, neither of these chromosome here has that dangerous part, what the chromosome 11 or 10 can have. That is probably a better way to say it actually. So I think usually people used to do say like, yeah, it's AA and you convert it as AB or AA, and as long as you have AB or AA you're safe. But it's probably better to say actually it's more like neither of these two have B, because they are very, very likely different. They're probably very similar, but they are extremely similar, but they are also very different. They have, I don't know how many cells is it per chromosome, but to get it, like it's like, yes, they have 900 millions equal micro whatever, but they have 100 different ones also. So it's like, yeah, so like, yes, they have a lot of similarities, they also have a few differences. So but yeah, I mean, in Uso, I guess what it seems to be, they really do this hard, right? They do really seem to be going for that thing very, very extensively, I think. So I think they are completely, it's very interesting, I think, as a perspective of philosophy. It's really illegal, right? It's yeah, in usually today, right? Because that is like, it's not eugenics, because you don't like kill people, you don't like sterilize people with the bee, what I can understand here in this anime, but they almost kinda do. If they're like, oh, you cannot marry someone, you're not allowed to, and I assume cheating is illegal for that matter, even they haven't mentioned it, but I mean, like, yeah, like, I assume it's very bad to cheat and so on. So you kind of, they're almost kind of genetics, right, in a way, if you look at it as a kind of harsh way, because the way you do it in this anime, I suppose, is that they just avoid the yeasts are bad, right? So like the result would be that no one with like, BB, or BB probably would die. Yeah, I'm saying BB is really bad. So the main point here, of course, is that if you have AB or BA or AB, doesn't matter, and you combo those two, a quarter of your children will die, stillbirth. You cannot give birth to a BB. They have no lung something, so you die. This is a horrible gene here, right? It just kills you. Probably very impossible to find today. Yeah, I mean, obviously, because as evolution has happened, those like, super bad, those really, really dangerous genes have, of course, been automatically removed from, mating, right? Because, yeah, the people with that worst combination wouldn't survive, so they wouldn't get their own kids, so that then they will, automatically be, padded out through the years of history, right? But still, I think they can have some diseases that was fighting that, and it kind of means they actually create a society where it's like, no, you can't, like, we're not gonna pair up anyone with B, whatever B is, and they end up only having A genes. So it's a very deterministic society actually. That probably is, it's very interesting, I think, as a philosophy for somebody's anime actually. And I wish I did this when I was more awake, and it was like 2 a.m. in the morning. But it's very interesting because I say the word a lot now. And I mean that from a perspective that, would this create the perfect human race or not, eventually? Because they're definitely gene manufacturing, right? I mean, what they're doing is, I suppose then, they haven't good details, but what I see is that they do as a breeding horse or a dog, right? They take like, oh, we want the best and strongest humans, the most beautiful humans. Okay, everyone has to be, perfectly combined with their, a spouse that they will have the best kids with, what they can have. As in the opening, you're like, oh, here's this super famous idol. She is married to this random guy, which is like a random, degree in something random. I mean, this young have a career, but like, yeah, like a random guy. And he looks happy with that, and which is pretty, because genetic wise they are the best patch, right? So it would, I don't know really, it's very interesting. I wish I always take the anime and talk to someone is really into biology, because it's very interesting in the sense that, does it create perfect humans eventually because they cannot keep doing the best combos, right, to get the best stats, or does it mean that you will have no mutation and so on? because this kind of society where everyone has to mate with a specific individual, it's kind of like the classic society in sci-fi, like the Asgard in Stargate. And I don't use cloning, but it's like eventually you get to a level where everyone has a very similar genes, I would suppose. So it kind of gets the reverse, right? Yeah, okay, start out as a breeding massive gene pool, and they can eliminate all the bad genes they see. So they should really be like they have this kind of gene pool, right? And the gene pool should get smaller and smaller. Not necessarily though, because they do different combos, so they would like create new gene setups the more they do it. So I honestly don't know. I mean, I would say I'm quite educated about these gene things, and I read a lot about this, but I'm not 100% sure how it will be, because it depends on how they will do it. They keep combining, I hope at least, different kind of pairings, right? So those pairings do create new gene setups, and they take that gene, but it feels like if you do it, it feels like it should actually be really bad if you keep doing it it's too long, because you take the big gene pool and you remove all the bad genes, so you have less gene pool. That is for sure at least. But it's more healthy gene pool because all the bad is removed by the state, just eliminating everyone that has bad genes, so they can't get kids and so on, right? So like everyone with two bad genes, you can get kids together, so then everyone in the next generation have just one of the bad genes, and you keep doing that. The more they can, and if you're in generation, they should eliminate a lot of stuff. But it also means that they do this, like, okay, we take these two people here, they have good powers, they combine them, and then they get this new power pretty much, right? And they keep doing that. So it feels like as long as they keep doing this, like match those two, they get those two, and then we have those two over there and those two, and we combine those two, then we get a new thing, and they could be doing that and just spreading it out as much as they can. That should mean that they avoid having just the one, right? But it feels like eventually it'd be like, oh, we combine that thing, and then we took that combination, and we combine those things. That sounds really weird. We combine those things, and eventually you will get something, I feel, that is like, oh, this is just the same thing, right? It feels like that. Like the combination isn't endless. So it would be like, oh, I combine these two and these two and these two and these two, and then you kind of move into it, right? And then you do that thing, and then you take it all the same. And it feels like you have this like a pyramid, right? It's a binary tree actually, and then the binary tree for the bottom, right? And then eventually you combine 2, 2, 2, and 2, and so binary tree is a tree that has 1, and then it splits 2, and then 2 because it's binary, it's 0, 1, and it just keeps going down. But it's a bit reverse, right? So you have the binary bottom, and then everything moves up into this one singular point. We have combined every gene perfectly, and then you have several of those reverse binary trees, and then you combine them with each other, which is just actually it's a bigger binary tree. But because then you have it's the exact same thing. I mean, it's like trying to visualize it, right? Like if you combine two binary trees with each other at the edges, at the top edges, that is creating a new binary tree when it has the first star. So if you have this thing, and then it's 1,000 points under it, you take another 1,000 and put that on that thing. This means you have doubled the binary. So that means you created a new top, right? And you put it first again. So it that doesn't mean anything really. It doesn't mean anything. It means you make it twice as big. But the point is that if you have like these different binary trees of genes, and you combine them from different islands, for example Japan, so you have like Hokkaido, you combine those, and you have Sapporo's city. What I'm saying, Honshu. I mean, and you have Honshu and you have Kyushu, and you combine those like you do the binary pyramid reverse thing on every island pretty much, right? Until you have like this is the perfect people here, the perfect genes combination we have. Then you start to combine them. Then I wish that actually could take this island gene and combine with other island gene, right? So you do that thing. And it's a bigger matter, I know, but I mean, like that's kind of I visualize it. And you keep doing that. It feels like you would reach a maximum, right, of people, right, genetically combinations. And then you will end up with that typical thing that you have in like sci-fi stand as like for example Stargate, and it's like this one race, and everyone in the race has like pretty much the same genes because they have been doing like genetically engineering for like 10,000 years, which is so advanced. So everyone is gone closer and closer because this is like the perfect race. And then eventually they end up with like, oh no shit, now we have like 1 billion people and everyone have the exact same genes because you just kept, closing in and removing the disbanded of genes of the sides effects and so on, and we end up having this, everyone is equal. genetically equal. That is probably what happened. I can't see it going another way, honestly. I say blatantly. No, I was thinking that if you do it exactly, you do it based on like you do this for infinite generations. That should be the outcome, mathematically, I think, at least. If you just keep doing the same thing, right? You loop that system, the binary reverse combination system. That's how they do it, and you loop that for infinite time. You should end up with you should have to use one gene, really, one gene combination, and that would be the perfect human then in the book. But the problem is that you should end up with everyone in one generation eventually, just having the exact same gene pool, of course, and then that would be really bad. Yeah, and then that is hard getting anywhere. You will stand then, as usually in modern sci-fi, you have races that will die out because they are so advanced and they ruin their own gene pool, right? And it feels like you will end up with that. It's interesting, philosophy-wise, because I'm thinking that how would you avoid it? Would you have to have laws saying that you're not allowed to like join these binary trees? The max like the districtive island in Japan, I wish that like each island having it just for easy's sake. But if you have another country like US, okay, every state has one of these combination trees, right? And eventually you say, okay, you're not allowed to like combine the states or something, so you can never. That wouldn't help because that would mean that you will reach the maximum much faster because you will have a less populated area and you will combine everyone. So in a less duration, you reach your apex faster instead, right? Because you have less apex to combine, so you reach it faster. But what I'm thinking that is that you will say something like you're not allowed to reach the apex if it's like 10 steps left or something. You have to only crossbreed with other 10 or so middle parts of other states or countries. So you have to like, okay, this is the tree, we're like here now because we can calculate when we reach the top pretty much right. And you say, okay, but now we're like in the middle of it, you have to combine two middles. You have to do this thing, take another state's or country's middle and throw that in, and obviously still do the best thing you can, but that's gonna create something completely new because that will break the tree you're in, and you have to repeat that always. I don't know, yeah, but maybe if you do it earlier then. But there's the feeling a country will do that. I think it's actually very interesting, and I'm getting on a tandem here, but it's very interesting because I'm thinking, how would you do it to perfectly emulate it, right? How would you do it to like when you stop? Maybe you have to have a law and say that, okay, you cannot combine these things after that's many steps or something, but the state does it itself though. So yeah, the problem is that first and foremost, it's not like private citizens are combining anyway, it's just a state. So the state could have to enforce it on themselves to begin with, it could be a problem, right? Because it could be like, well, we said 10 is a step, what were we wrong? Let's say 13 instead. Like, like there would be the lawmaker saying that, yeah, when we did this program, they said 10 should be the step of stopping, but we can't see any issues right now, so let's say 5 instead because it's so expensive, or it's like you don't have the budget to go to 10, or actually because like if they had the system, it probably would cost a lot of money to just say, oh no, everyone has to now. But actually it would probably make the most sense though, easiest way to solve it is to say that, okay, we are like enabling the system of purification of binary reverse tree combination, that I call it right now. I mean that word, I'm quoting that. I'm claiming the coin of that reverse binary tree genetic pool diversity elimination. That's my name. I'm gonna be a scientist. The worst thing is I'm a scientist too. I'm a scientist. Yeah, that is always baffles me sometimes. I'm a published scientist since I was like 20 or something. It's crazy. I'm so obviously old for that too. I've been published so long. But I'm not doing genetics though. I should have, because I'm awesome. No, but like, it's an interesting, right? You get into that. Oh, I'm tired. But yeah, it's just my solution now, which I feel pretty good. If you take Japan example, it's easy because of islands. The best way to do it probably, you would do the genetic diversity elimination thing, for like, let's say 200 years. And then you say, okay, everyone at Honso, but it's a big island though, I know, but like everyone at West Honso then, so like Osaka, or that region, Kansai. I mean, so that you have to move to Great Tokyo area, and then other ones have to. Yeah, that would be the best thing probably. That'd probably be the best thing. So we say that okay, all the females probably because that's easier. All the females or all the males, I mean whatever, but yeah. All the females move. I don't know, but it's probably easier if everyone can't move, of course, because it doesn't help if you just have like that swap. That would do nothing, of course. So if you move everyone in the east to the west, that would do anything. They would just move each other, right? So that would do anything. But obviously, my point is that you would have to say that okay, all males you have to move. When you get married, you will be assigned a wife at the other region, like the Kansai region, and so you have to move there. Or maybe you have to move early. Maybe it's like no, you're born, so you have to move right away. There'd be really state control, and the parents wouldn't move with them, I suppose. But anyway, this is something that would happen like every 100 years or 200 years, something. They would have like, nope, this time everyone has to move to Kansai. And if you move to Kansai, you have to move to the Greater Tokyo area, and Yokohama area, and so on, right? You have to move to that area. And then in the next 100 years, they say like, okay, now everyone in like Kansai, you have to move to the males, whatever, females, whatever, like something like that. You have to move to Honshu, let's say the islands, I'm saying, Kyoto. I think Kyoto, so you have to move to Kyoto. And of course, the first time you did this, Kyoto had to move to Hokkaido, right? So they always do that. They have some kind of system, right? Which is like you do that thing and that thing and that thing, and this is islands here now. So like 5 islands, right? And you do this kind of regions, and then next time you say, okay, so the first time you did this region, this region, and this region, and this region. This time you do this region and this region, so then you do it order, right? And you do a different order each time. You have to do that probably forever, though. You feel like you still would end up with the same problem though, because you never eliminating all the bad genes, and also all the different genes. It's not bad genes. You eliminating genes aren't similar, but I mean, I think it would be good, because it's like I think it would break down into yeah. I think it would break out into a similar. Gene pool, but you will avoid going into that, because you will like forcefully have different regions. You work on your reverse binary tree per region, right, for amount of time, and before you feel that this time is enough, you probably calculate that roughly how many iterations it could be. Let's say 3, easy sake, or let's say 6, 200, 6, 7 or so, and then you say, well, actually you get the married at 20, so actually it's like, yeah, it's 5 iterations per 100 years, so probably like 150 years, maybe something like that. I'm just throwing that. I'm not a pedagogical. I'm taking generally math here. You combine those with other regions you set up, and then you do like a reverse region thing, or reverse like a change of order each time you do this. Maybe you even do this even faster, but then you only like 1 region per time. So it's like every 25 years, every 50 years, you take 1 region and do the shuffle thing. It's still expensive though. But I don't know, I think that could be a good way to avoid genetically being stuck, right? Because otherwise, I think you do have the classic like sci-fi thing when you have done this thing, right? And you end up with having everyone on the exact same gene pool. And it's like, oh shit, we can't get kids now or something. We ruined ourselves. Like we are just clones of each other. That's the problem, right? Because the main issue is everyone ends up as pretty much clones, and then when you pair someone when they already have the same DNA, they will just have the kid will have the same DNA again, right? Because they have eliminated all different diversity in the genes. So when you combine the 2 genes, then later on, their chromosomes are exactly the same. So that's what I mean earlier. Their chromosomes aren't like A and B, and like you actually have A1 and A2, which I said earlier. It's probably a better way. They always say like A and B and so on. We're talking about these things, but I'm thinking about it. It's harder to understand, but it's probably better to say neither of these genes have B, right? Because they are still different. A2 and A1 are very different. They have some similarities, but a lot of differences as well, right? So they're probably about that, but neither has the B issue, right? That's probably how I look at it. But in this case, then, right, the issue then is what happens is that of course you have just everyone has A1 and A1, like they are exactly identical, so they can only give exactly A1 to another A1, and then your kids will also have exactly A1 and A1. So that's why they will be clones in the end. Maybe I should say that like half an hour ago. Thinking about it, I was like, that's probably what I should said earlier. But I mean, basically, the issue is that everyone will just end up with A1 and A1, right? And it's exactly A1, and then be clones, and then they will just have problems. So apparently, at least the maximum, it's an hour recording on this system. And it's like, oh yeah, this is a huge video. I cut the video into a genetic video and Uso video, but still Uso. So I'm gonna. I mean, this could be a review, but the other video I'm gonna call like genetic rambling in a nice something. But yeah, but it's a final worship and a super late night for just cover it. I think it's very interesting because I'm not saying that I have the solution, but that's a solution I could think about, that you would enforcefully change the environment of your reverse tree there. So you will put the tree in another place, half the tree, it means, and you will still combine them perfectly in the next place. You will still be like you go there, like you will marry the perfect spouse for you at the other places, that which still would mean you would eliminate those. So, but you would have a lot of bigger. That actually might be really good, because the solution of that would be that you probably be like, well, I'm gonna eliminate all the bad stuff, right, from these people. You would eliminate the bad stuff, because you would still be like, okay, I'm moving this Steve person here over to this other region, and he has this B gene. I'm seeing horrible, yeah. So, but he has a B gene in one of his genes, so he has to marry a woman that doesn't have the B gene, and she said this is an F person, but she doesn't have the B gene. Okay, let's marry them. So you get like F and C instead, right? So you would do that thing. So you would still eliminate like birth disease and so on, probably, without running into just having AA quickly at least. But it feels like in an endless time loop, you would end up with just having A all the time instead anyway. But it feels kind of like, and I've talked about this before, but isn't that the outcome of evolution of humanity? Probably wouldn't actually, because it would mutate. Yeah, that's the problem, I suppose. In a free society, or freedom, chaotic, you would assume that in endless time humanity and any other species would evolve into just being A1, right? Because eventually the ones with diseases or strength or whatever, they will automatically eliminate the bad genes. So in endless time you should assume getting into an A1 position, but it's not true, because what happens is that the planet, or genetically wise, you should like mutate to something, because if everyone is like not A1 yet, but let's say everyone is like A5 and A1 is screwed. A5 means they have like 4 differences. In this case, A1 means you have, it's called A0. So A0 means you have no difference. So at A10 or something, it's starting to be enormously close. You pretty much square at 10, right? But say you're at 800, so you're still getting close to that, like, oh shit, but it's still not that yet. At that time, you would assume, or even before as well, but you would assume that people would mutate. A mutation of the Homo sapien, maybe something new, right? Because they would be maybe stronger, better, more kids, highest survival rate, survival rate is not the strongest, right? They might be survive better. They also must generally evolve into something completely different. So you have this A1, blah blah, and suddenly you get someone it's like an E100 instead. That is a little different actually from A100. But they have most of the same possibilities, but they have some differences that might make them have more kids or something. You might discover that East people they have like double the kids, or like the double chance of kids for some reason. That's better because they have more kids and you produce pretty much the same kids, like A99 kids, or pretty much A99 kids, but you still have the double, the birth rate or something. That's a better thing to have, and then they will actually automatically eliminate out A99, in say like a non-control system really close to each other. That's kind of why. That's kind of like, for example, when you give birth, they also you do cross the different genes and so on. You do cross the different genes and so on, but generally it's like why is the biologically wise for humans you randomize 50% or about that, it's actually a higher birth rate for I think one gender, but anyway, like that wouldn't that if you ignore war and all that stuff and so on, like what people do to each other, if you look at the biological wise way back, why wasn't like 80%, 20, something like that? Are that because the society or whatever the genders didn't work out right? The biological wise it has moved to 50%, or has been that since ever, because ever, but it's like egg or chicken, right? But that kind of system creates it by itself because it's apparently the best system. And it's not 60%, I don't even think so, it's something else, but like 51 women, that. But yeah, it's like the system in itself, it's trying to find the best percentage of all those stuff, right? Like genetically, like evolution wise. So yeah, so that also could be a variation. You can see that, but everyone is equal anyway, so why have males, right? I mean, yeah, you need some males, but it could be like if everyone was a clone of everyone, exactly the same, 100% the same, except gender, that is better to use have like one male and 100 women, because you will still have the same, because you cannot, the pairing is just always A0 anyway, you only A0, so it's no point having different A0 men. You can have one A0 man, because they will only breed the same kid anyway. They can also be like systematically, adaptation, right? So the A0 is going towards that, but then like B0, they're going towards just having more women, because they only get the same kids anyway. So they just want to have more birth rate of that. Something like that might happen, right? I'm completely crazy. I'm so late now. See, but this is great. I'm late, so I'm getting all my crazy ideas now. But like basically, that could happen. Something possible in the system. But that's a system that is open in an endless time that goes against it. But when you have a state that's controlling it, so it's social structure, yeah, we have a state that's controlling it, like exactly. That should mean that this kind of random alteration shouldn't work. That's the problem, right? Because you say that, okay, here's this like F0 people, F100 people, they are starting to appear. They didn't get there. They have a mutation. They didn't get there. They should be A99, but they are something else. So let's call it F99 or F100 instead. And then you will say, okay, we also have this other F99 people over here in this other city. They mutated. They cannot get kids, right? So that's the thing, right? In a controlled society with perfectly gene pool, they will say that, okay, well, this guy here has a mutation. Now you're gonna pair with someone else that has the most less mutation, right? You balance you out, or you are not allowed to get kids. Yeah, or you be genetics and you're not allowed to get kids. That's the thing by this system here. Eventually, you always will reach that thing, especially even without the switching thing, because you will reach that thing. So this is interesting. It's very interesting. But yeah, I think that if you have the reverse tree thing and you combine it with the marriage thing and doing it, but you switch them around, that should mostly stop the going to the roof thing. At least in a lot of thousands of years, so maybe it's fine. Anyway, my long talk here about genetics in the night is over. See you guys and have a great day.